Coming up on This Week in Radio Tech, our guest is Scott Cason. Scott and I have been like ships that pass in the night for the past 20-some years. I met Scott 20-plus years ago in Louisville, and he's a contract engineer, and he's one of these ABIP inspectors. He'll inspect your station and keep the FCC away. How about that? He's got a lot of great ideas about engineering, and we're going to talk to Scott coming up next on TWiRT.
This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Broadcasters General Store with outstanding service, savings, and support online at bgs.cc. By Broadcast Bionics with the Bionic Studio, including talk show control, social media, and visual radio. Broadcast Bionics brings exceptional audience engagement to radio and TV. By AIR, featuring Playout One radio automation software, comprehensive streaming solutions, website content management, and social media tools for maximum listener engagement on the web at AIIR.com. By Angry Audio. Audio problems disappear when you get angry at angryaudio.com. And by Max Connect Wireless, prioritized high-speed internet service designed for transmitter sites and remote broadcasts.
Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to that light bulb that came off the top of a tower. Hey, I'm Kirk Harnack, your host, here in the Telos Alliance studio in Nashville, Tennessee. Back home after many, many weeks on the road at different broadcasting conventions, different state conventions, and even one up in Canada. So glad to be back in the chair, glad to be sleeping in my own bed. That's a good feeling to have. Anyway, glad that you're along. Thanks a lot. Hey, be sure you like and share if you like the show. And if you don't like the show, well, I'm glad you're watching anyway. I'm Kirk Harnack here in Nashville. As I mentioned, I'm in this Telos Alliance studio. Really appreciate Telos for giving me a little bit of time off on Thursday afternoons to do this podcast and to bring you interesting and usually fun and sometimes noteworthy engineering information. Sometimes it's just silly and good to have in the back of your head. All right, Chris Tarr may be along. I just texted with Chris. He saw the eye doctor today, and his eyes are still dilated. So if Chris shows up, he may be wearing some frou-frou sunglasses. He posted a picture earlier, and I thought, Chris, dude, are you okay? Well, our guest is Scott Cason, so let's jump right into Scott Cason. Scott, from Louisville, Kentucky. Hey, welcome in. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Kirk, and I'm coming from the Bubba and Earl's Bait Shop studio, just to get that in there, too.
Where is that? Are you in Louisville proper or across the river
the state
or where?
prison. Actually, no, I'm based in Oldham County up in LaGrange.
Oh, okay, okay.
It's just easier to tell people that I'm based in Louisville because we do have the Kentucky State Reformatory Prison in LaGrange. And if I tell people I'm from LaGrange, the first question they're asking is, well, how long have you been incarcerated? So.
I seem to remember that from my many years of living in Kentucky, although somehow I was able to avoid the state penitentiary. How far are you from, say, Prospect, Kentucky?
I'm probably about 3 miles.
Oh, okay. You're that close. Okay. Well, I have family living in Prospect, Kentucky, and my mom. My mom lived there. My mom passed away earlier this year, but mom lived in Prospect as well. So it's a beautiful part of the world, and we all enjoyed it. So Scott, did I meet you so many years ago, 20 plus years ago at like Radio 1 in Louisville? Was that where we met?
Yeah. I was the chief engineer for the Radio 1 stations in Louisville, and you were in town for some reason, I can't remember what, and stopped by the studios, and I guess we went to lunch, spent a little while together. But I think that's where we actually met, when I was in Louisville.
I probably, or I may have had an Omnia FM or an Omnia 6 under my arm and said, hey, you ought to try one of these out, because that was my job, is to ask people like you to try the processor.
I think we may have just installed an Omnia 6.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to take our first quick commercial break. But first, Scott, tell me what you're doing now, because that's going to be the basis for our conversation today and learning some of what you know.
Well, which job do you want to hear about? I'm the inspector for the Kentucky Broadcasters Association. I do some ABIP inspections for Indiana. I've got my own engineering contracting firm. I'm the engineer for University of Louisville Radio Network. So it's kind of like, what part do you want to hear?
Well, I think we're going to cover the interesting parts of all of those things because there are things that we all can learn from those. I'm interested always in the ABIP, or as you said, the ABIP program, Alternative Broadcast Inspection Program. It's interesting to find out about that, to find out what stations are maybe still getting wrong that they could easily fix, and things that they're getting wrong that, hey, that's pretty serious. Let's get that fixed so we don't have to we don't have to get you involved with the FCC on that. And also, you've got some information about the EAS plan for Kentucky, and not that that's applicable to everybody. It's applicable to Kentucky stations and engineers, but I'd like to understand how that process works and how that's related to all the other 49 states and maybe some other areas with regard to EAS. And then the Sports Radio Network for Louisville sports. I want to understand, what's working for you there and how that, what some of your responsibilities are. Then you've got a concern. We talked yesterday about real RF expertise and in our industry and just what you foresee there. But hey, we're going to take a quick break. Our show, This Week in Radio Tech, is brought to you in part by my good friends at AIR, AIIR.com. Let's check them out. Hey, it's Kirk Harnack, and I'm here with Ricky Lee, the CEO of AIR. Ricky, you guys make a fantastic automation system, but streaming is a really big deal. Tell me about streaming with AIR.
It really is. We've got a beautiful streaming platform with an incredible dashboard with fantastic analytics. And you can buy it for just $20 a month, all you can eat. No limits on bandwidth or bit rates. And you can also record shows as well. So if you like to deliver on-demand content for $20 a month, you can stream and deliver that on-demand content to an RSS feed that can feed your radio player, your mobile apps, or a podcast that people can download and enjoy.
Now, $20 a month, that must be for just some slow MP3, right?
No, MP3, AAC, and we also now support HLS, which is big in the industry right now.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. How do I start to explore or find out more about streaming through AIR?
You go to air.com, AIIR.com/streaming, and from there, with a credit card, you can sign up and get started.
Check them out. And thanks so much, Ricky Lee, for making streaming available at a really ridiculously affordable price, $20 per station per month. AIIR.com. And they are the makers also of Playout One. So you know that the streaming integrates easily with Playout One. Of course, it works with any automation or any feed that you want to provide to it. All right. Hey, it's Kirk Harnack at This Week in Radio Tech, and Scott Cason from Louisville, Kentucky is an engineer with us. Scott, Louisville sits on the border of Kentucky and Indiana. In fact, I learned, even though I've never lived in Louisville, learned years ago that the meteorologists in the area call the area there, the two-state area, Kentuckiana, which sounds a whole lot better than Indiaki.
Well, it sounds better than what they call it up in northern Indiana, where it meets with Michigan. It's Michiana. And it's like, I'll stick with Kentuckiana better.
Kentuckiana sounds good. So you're involved with the Kentucky Broadcasters Association. Tell me about that relationship and then how you work in ABIP in inspections, and then also about how that works with Indiana. Tell us about that.
Well, the relationship with the KBA started, their inspector was having a few health problems, and they had gotten behind. And the president of the KBA at the time called me and asked me. It was kind of a panic because he had like 20 stations that needed inspecting. He said, would you come on and help us? I'm like, yeah, sure, no problem, I can do it. So I did that with the KBA, I guess, for about 3 or 4 years. And it kind of evolved into Chris Winkle, who's now the president of the KBA, had asked me about being kind of an engineering liaison between the member stations that kind of needed help and myself. If they needed someone to relamp a tower or something like that and didn't know who to call, then they would set me up as someone that could be kind of like their trouble number. And from there, it kind of evolved to me taking over the EAS plan for Kentucky. And the funny thing is when I first moved to Kentucky back in 1999, and I was noticing that Louisville, their LP1 and LP2 were coming out of the same facility, and I think they were using the same EAS encoder decoder. And I made a mental note, well, that doesn't make sense, and somebody needs to change that. So, 10 years later, here I am in a position to change that. And that's kind of where that relationship involved from there. And as far as the Indiana broadcasters, I used to own a radio station, a standalone FM up in Vevey, which is halfway between Louisville and Cincinnati. And the IBA president kind of knew of me from talking with Chris at the KBA and asked me if I would be interested in kind of helping them out some with getting some inspections done. They were kind of getting behind too. So it's, again, it's like, yeah, sure, I can help you out, no problem. And it's kind of evolved from there. With Indiana, I'm only an inspector. I'm not involved with the SECC or anything like that.
Ah, gotcha. Okay. All right. Yeah, the state plan. I'm curious, when you do ABIP inspections, do you have a checklist, formal or informal, that you go over to make sure you're hitting all the points that you should as an ABIP inspector?
Right. Well, there's a checklist, and also we've seen in the past, based on the Enforcement Bureau, what they're focused on, and they're really kind of focused on EAS, tower registration, that kind of stuff. So that's the kind of things that I try to focus on, is to make sure that you're getting your EAS test, that you're relaying any EAS test and or activations, and also making sure that the ASR number is posted at the tower, and the tower lights are actually functioning, and that you have a way to know that the tower lights are functioning. But then there's other things along the way that, I try to look at as far as the technical aspect of the station. It got to be a lot easier when they moved the public file online, because there were some stations that I would spend most of my time going through the manual paper public file. Whereas now, usually the night before I go to a station, I can look at the public section file online, make sure everything is in there, and if not, if there's something missing, kind of give the station owner or manager a heads up when I'm at the station the next day.
So my question about the checklist kind of leads me to the next one. How much of what you do is strictly checklist based, and could you just do it on the checklist? And how much of it is based on your own prior experience as an ABIP inspector and just your general knowledge as a thoughtful contract engineer who is looking out for safe and legal operation of broadcast facilities? How does experience play into this ABIP job?
Well, I think experience helps a lot, because you're also, while you're going down the checklist, you may see some issues that the station has that needs to correct. But then as an engineer, you can also recommend ideas to correct these issues. Instead of just saying, where your watt meter's not working, you can kind of give them ideas of perhaps how to get it repaired, or even give them some information on repair shops that could get it fixed for them. Something of that effect.
So most of the things you talked about at first about the ABIP checklist had to do with radio stations interfacing with other governmental agencies or public safeties. You mentioned EAS, and you mentioned tower lights, and make sure those procedures and equipment are in place and getting used properly. And you just started to mention operational issues. I'm wondering, do you look for, maybe if you're inspecting an AM station, do you look for their use of the famous Friday night football special temporary nighttime authority? Do you look for things like that?
Well, if the station is doing it properly, I won't see it. And I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay.
But yeah, you kind of look for stuff like that, and you kind of have to balance that too. I understand what these stations are going through, and you kind of have to, maybe just tell them you just shouldn't be doing that, and kind of leave it at that for them to decide.
Yeah. Okay. So on the one hand, if a station passes their ABIP inspection, what does that get them in terms of not being bothered by the FCC unless somebody complains?
Well, when a station requests an inspection, we'll let the FCC know that an inspection is coming up for them. And then that kind of, the FCC is like, okay, hands off, we won't bother them or anything. And then once the inspection is passed, they get the certificate that's good for 3 years. And like you said, unless there is a complaint filed, the FCC won't just drop in on you for a surprise inspection.
Okay. Understood. So, we won't name any names, but maybe what are just the common, like, come on, guys, take care of this. It's not hard to do. If you didn't know you have to take care of X, Y, and Z, here are X, Y, and Z, and let's take care of this. Well, what are some common errors or omissions that you see at stations?
Probably the biggest one, and the most, in my opinion, the most important one is your tower lights. I had a station that I was inspecting that, like you said, we won't name any names. And normally, if their tower is lit, I'll ask them, "How do you know when the beacon's not flashing?" And 9 times out of 10, they'll give me an answer that I can accept. That is where, they've got a remote control that's monitoring it. It'll then call out if there is a beacon failure, and then they're checking on them at least once every 24 hours. But there was this one particular station. The guy said, "Well, I check them once every Monday. I'll check in when I'm driving in the station, make sure they're working." I said, "Okay." I said, "So Monday they're working. What happens Tuesday if the bulbs in the beacon blow? How do you know?" And he kind of gave me this look, and I said, "You won't know until you look the next Monday." I said, "How many airplanes do you think fly over this area in any given day that might hit your tower if the beacon wasn't flashing?" And I think that kind of registered with him that, hey, maybe I need to be checking this thing more often. But that was the biggest thing, is just that, how do you know your tower lights are not working? And it's occasionally you'll trip somebody up, but most of them are on top of things like that.
So remind me, if you would, what rule applies here? What stations or what situations do you have to get actively notified by automated equipment, and in what situations can you inspect them either visually or by remote control some way every 24 hours? So in other words, if you're doing it every 24 hours yourself, then 23 hours and 59 minutes could go by if they failed right after the last time you looked at them. Which case, how does that work?
Well, the FCC and the FAA, to some degree, require that you visually look at them 24 hours. And if there's a failure, and I'm trying to remember the stipulation of when there's a failure, when you're to be notified. We've got 30 minutes to notify the FAA upon a failure of a flashing light on a tower.
Yeah.
I personally like to just recommend people that let it call you as soon as the thing fails. The sooner the better. So that kind of relieves your responsibility if something were to happen. But the visual inspection, if you've got an automated system that's watching your tower lights, then you have to inspect the automated system. Again, I'm kind of fuzzy here. I know that you're supposed to do quarterly inspections of the system, and
Yeah.
it may be quarterly that you're supposed to look at the automated system and test it. But again, I recommend people do it once a day, just in case something does happen. You don't want to be receiving in on that.
And at several of my stations for years back, even when we had a simpler remote control, like a Sign Systems that had a current monitor that was smoothed out, over time, we could set up, we could have it monitor that current. And if it, dropped below what it should be, because, the beacon's flashing, but over time there's an average there. And you can there's a clock in most remote control systems. You can tell it to, hey, ignore this during daylight hours or during certain hours, or check it from 10 p.m. till 4 a.m. when it's going to be dark, at least in most of the U.S. And and if it drops below this and the time is between those hours, then call me. Is that a pretty standard procedure even for older stations?
It is. I mean, I've set up the Sign Systems remote control to do that. And that was the great thing about the Sign System, is you could program it for a specific time of day to watch this window if it falls below where it's supposed to be. They do make, and I'm trying to remember who the company is. I've got 3 of them on the shelf out there in the garage. There's a company that makes current monitors. And, like you said, it's current going up and down. And if it falls below a certain level, it'll give you a contact closure, which is always good to have too. But
yeah.
of course, those current monitors don't work very well with LED systems. The great thing about the LED lights is that their controller has alarms inside of it that if there's a failure of the red flashing beacon, the infrared beacon now, and the white beacon, it'll give a contact closure, and you can have it called out that way.
Yeah, that's a good point. Whether you have a strobe system like we had for probably the last 30 years or so, being somewhat popular, or a newer LED system, yeah, those typically the controller on the ground or in your building provides a contact closure for failure, depending on what kind, and maybe even several different closures for what kind of failure it is. I'm glad you pointed out the infrared light. That is, those seem to be in place wherever there's helicopter traffic or around military bases where you've got people using night vision goggles. Isn't that right?
That's correct. And those systems are to be tested quarterly. Quarterly inspection of the lights and quarterly inspection of the alarm system. There's a tower I purchased about 5 years ago in Carrollton, and I put an LED system on it. And just reading through the rules, the infrared part of the beacon is to be treated just like the visual part of the beacon. If the infrared fails, even if the red is still flashing, if the infrared fails, it's still supposed to throw an alarm off.
Yeah. And the station has to still notify the FAA.
Correct.
Right. So the FAA can, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a 30-minute notification with the FAA. So then the FAA issues what we call a NOTAM, Notice to Airmen. And pilots are supposed to check these NOTAMs along their flight route for things like beacons that are not functioning or anything else that they may be interested in knowing while they're in the air.
Gotcha. And by the way, you've mentioned 30 minutes to notify the FAA. I take it that's within 30 minutes of you knowing, the station knowing that there's a problem. Because if you don't know about it, how can the 30-minute timer start?
Right. And then, of course, then the FAA can go back and say, well, you're supposed to know about it. So eventually it comes back on the tower or the station owner to take care of that.
So one other little topic I'd like to ask you about, and this used to be a huge problem, and I perceive that overmodulation of FM stations may not be a bigger problem as it used to be. It doesn't make your station get out any farther. And with the way radios are built, the way they have been built with IF sections, intermediate frequency sections, and now that many of them are digitally tuned and even DSP tuned, you can quickly get into a distortion on the receiver, on your listener's radio, if you're overmodulating very much, because they try to optimize the receiver when they design a receiver for the right amount of modulation. And if you go over that, well, the receiver's not designed for that. What do you find, and how do you treat stations you're inspecting about their modulation level on FM stations?
Of course, and also on FM, if you're overmodulating, you're going to interfere with any station on either side of you. Worth pointing that out too. But most of the time, I don't find modulation monitors at some of these stations.
Right.
And the only thing you have is the little LED on the meter in front of the exciter. And of course, if it's over here in the red a lot, you need to turn that down. But when the FCC dropped the requirement to have modulation monitors, a lot of folks got rid of their modulation monitors. They didn't replace them when they broke. So that's kind of, if I wanted to get really deep into that, I would probably take an oscilloscope out there with me to measure the modulation the way it should be measured. But if other things are in order, that's not something that I don't start digging if everything else is in order at the radio station.
Yeah. Okay. All right. To tell you what, we'll talk about that another time. I like the little SDR radios that you can plug into your Windows PC and run a program that Leif Cason wrote, and I think Alex Hartman has control over that program now. I need to find out how it's available, but it's a mod monitor. To me, I use that program to make sure my RDS injection is correct, because it's hard to set that without some means of measuring it. And of course, at the same time, I'm making sure my pilot is about 9%, and then making sure my modulation is about right. With the RDS on, I typically make sure it's 103, 104%. total modulation. And we're not really in loudness wars with other stations, at least not in markets that I'm in. How are things in Louisville? We got loudness
Yeah,
war there?
we lost the loudness war. There's still PDs who want it to be, as loud as they can get it. And like
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier about the digital radios, as you try to explain to them, is that, uh, they say that we want it loud and clean. And I tell them, okay, pick one, because you can't do both. I said it would be much better to have a little bit lower modulation and have a clean sounding signal than to have it overmodulated and you're running your listeners off and you don't understand why your TSLs are low. So yeah, I think the loudness wars are over. At least I hope they are, because that's something I never really cared for.
Yeah, I hear you. All right. Hey, we're talking to Scott Cason. Scott is a contract engineer in the Louisville, Kentucky area, or Kentuckiana, southern Indiana, and a lot of Kentucky. He's also doing a ABIP, Alternative Broadcast Inspection Program, inspections in Kentucky and Indiana. I'm Kirk Harnack, and you're watching or listening to This Week in Radio Tech. It's our 769th episode. Wow. Hey, our show's brought to you in part by my friends over at Broadcast Bionics in merry old England. And they have a product that I think is just, it's what a lot of stations and a lot of engineers need to have. You've heard so much about virtualization of broadcast functionality, whether it's audio consoles or, of course, automation systems or codecs or audio processing or phone systems. These things can all be virtualized and run in a virtualized environment. But so many of us are not experts in making that work. And I'm not talking about virtual machines running on Windows. That typically doesn't have enough direct connection between the software and the hardware in order to run fast. Because when we're doing audio, we need to be as close to the metal, if you will, as close to the silicon as we can get. And that's where Broadcast Bionics comes in. They have made this really simple. You don't have to be a Linux expert. You don't have to be a container expert to use Virtual Rack. Virtual Rack is the solution from Broadcast Bionics. Excuse me. And it is amazing what they have done. If you don't get Virtual Rack, you do have some somewhat complex setup to do in making containerized software work in a Linux environment. It is not child's play. My own colleagues at Telos Alliance, they do this all the time. But this is a way to do it yourself. That is, get Virtual Rack from Broadcast Bionics, turn it on, browse into it, set your IP addresses, and then there's like an app store inside it. And you pick the products you want, whether it's from Telos Alliance or Sound 4, Ferncast, or 2WCOM. These are the stations, there's the companies and their apps that they're supporting right now, and they'll support more broadcast apps as they come out from other companies. Of course, I'm familiar with Telos Alliance. My employer, Telos, makes a lot of different things that are virtualized, including the Forza FM audio processor, Zephyr Connect, which is a multitude of codecs, VXS, which is a phone system for one studio or many studios, and also audio consoles like the Altus, the Axia Altus. Well, anyway, you turn it on, you browse in there, you pick the apps you want to install, you click them, boom, within a minute or two, they're downloaded from the internet because containers are relatively small. They're installed. They're installed in the right way in the with regard to your networking inside the computer, and then you just need to license those products from their respective manufacturers. Many products work, at least let you test them out without being licensed. They may, put some beep noises in the processing or in the audio console, but that you can see if they work, and then you can license them as you normally would. It's a great concept. It's great in practice, too. You can also do failover, buy 2 units and have them watch each other. Dan McQuillan is the managing director there. He leads the software development teams. It's some of his ideas that go into these things. And he's got some videos, as you can see, on this website at Broadcast Bionics. It's bionics.co.uk or Virtual Rack. Really brilliant design. My colleagues at Telos Alliance have looked at this several times, and they say, this is really smart. This is great for people who don't know Linux, don't want to learn Linux, don't want to pay the manufacturer to install it. Just get Virtual Rack. It is beautiful. Thanks a lot, Broadcast Bionics. Their website, bionics.co.uk, or an alternative, bionic.radio. Bionic.radio. Thanks, Broadcast Bionics, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. Kirk Harnack here, and my guest is Scott Cason, a contract engineer from the Louisville, Kentucky area. I've known Scott for the better part of almost 25 years now. Scott, lots more to talk about. Let's hit quickly on this EAS plan for Kentucky. Did you tell me that it has been, officially approved, or where is that process?
Yes, it has. As I touched on earlier, I moved to Louisville in 1999 and went to work for Blue Chip Broadcasting. And I'm looking at Kentucky's EAS plan, and it was a daisy chain kind of mishmash of stations. And our LP1 and LP2 in Louisville came out of the same facility. And I had made the mental note that someday somebody needs to change this. Well, eventually, with my work with the KBA, the person who changed it was me. And I had dug up some information from previous state plans, and the Kentucky Educational Network, Kentucky Educational Television Network, used to be part of the EAS plan, but at the time it wasn't. So we started having discussions with KET, and I had learned that the NPR Squawk channel had FEMA was on the Squawk channel. So then with my work with the NPR station in Louisville, I asked those guys, I said, can you put the Squawk channel in the EAS decoder and let's just see what it does? And they were getting weekly tests from FEMA. And we had talked to the KET people about becoming a part of this, and they were really interested in being a part of the EAS plan again. And both of those two entities bring something different. KET has a direct microwave link with the state capitol in Frankfurt. So if the governor needed to get on television in a hurry, he's right there on KET. The NPR stations with their Squawk channel and their EAS encoders, decoders became kind of a mini PEP station because they have a direct link with FEMA. So then we incorporated that into the state EAS plan. KET covers 100% of the state of Kentucky. And with all the NPR affiliates here in Kentucky, they covered, I think we figured up it was 98%. The part they didn't cover was up in northern Kentucky. And we had those people, if they wanted to, could monitor WLW. Well, KET was also monitoring WLW and WSM in Nashville, who are both PEP stations. So we had 3 ways, actually, if you count the iPods server, there are 4 ways for national alerts to get into Kentucky. And when I presented this to the guys at the FCC, they thought it was great, that they hadn't seen anything like this before. You know, not to toot my own horn because that doesn't sound right, but they just thought it was a great plan because they were obviously concerned with national alerts. How can you get national alerts out? So we finally got it approved and started rolling it out. And the first thing I noticed was that people were telling me they sound so much better. Well, because you're not monitoring an AM station, 40 miles away with a bunch of static in it. You're monitoring most of the NPR stations are Class B FMs. I think there's a couple of Class C FMs. So you're monitoring clean FM audio and clean TV audio. So yeah, it's going to sound better. And then one of the things that I noticed for me personally is that if a station had a problem receiving an alert, then I didn't have to spend time tracing back down through the little daisy chain of where the alert was supposed to come through. I could pick up the phone and call my KET people, or I knew all of the engineers at our NPR stations. I could pick up the phone and call them, and we could figure out what was going on. So it has worked out better than I anticipated it working out. Of course, now that we've got it in place, we haven't had a national alert for us to really test it out with. So I'm looking forward to maybe we could do that perhaps next year. But I'm interested to see how a national alert will work with this many threads that we have coming into Kentucky for it.
Cool. Wow. That sounds like you're using all the right resources available to you on that EAS plan. So
well also on KET, I'd like to touch on this as well, is that KET has between 12 and 13 transmitters, full power transmitters over Kentucky. And the one thing that I brought up to them is that I don't want an alert in northern Kentucky lighting up your entire network. I would like for, if it's a localized alert, we could just hit one or two of your transmitters. So then they went before the legislature and got money appropriated to where they could put equipment at each of their transmitter sites that's addressable with the EAS index. And now we can, if there's something going on in Paducah, we can target it just to those Paducah transmitters, Paducah area transmitters, and not the transmitters up in northern Kentucky. So that was another thing that KET really kind of took the ball with and ran with this on us.
Wow. Would that imply that in Kentucky you have a method to avoid something that happens with some regularity here in Tennessee? You have alerts that may be put out by the TBI, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, and maybe there is a possible child abduction in Memphis, and yet that alert goes across the entire state of Tennessee because that's what TBI is responsible for. So people in Bristol, Tennessee, literally almost a 10-hour drive away, get the same child abduction emergency as they do in the Memphis area.
Yes.
Can Kentucky avoid that problem?
Yes. Well, obviously you want the child abduction going out as much as you can, but in a case of where it's sort of kind of a localized alert, if there's a gas leak, if there's some type of chemical release, then we can localize it just to the KET transmitters that are where that alert is, and the rest of the state, it won't interrupt KET's programming of the rest of the state. So yeah, we can target these alerts to where they need to be and where they would be the most effective.
Good. Okay. Good to hear. Good to hear. Hey, is anything else on the EAS subject before we moved on?
That's
good.
Really all I can think of. We did go talk to the Kentucky emergency management people when we were doing this, and they were thrilled. You know how emergency management people are. They were thrilled that we were coming to them and wanting to do this. And what I've got them doing is they originate our monthly alerts now from their operations center in Frankfurt. So that way we can test them that if there is an alert, if they do have to send out an alert, they're doing our required monthly test and they're doing weekly tests. So that way we can know that, okay, this is working, and it won't be when we actually need it to when we realize there's a failure. So I've got a lot of redundancy built in, and I've got a lot of testing built in. So we know that when we need it, it's going to be there.
Cool. All right. I want to switch to a topic that I don't know a lot about, but I think is fun because it's like doing a really professional remote every week, and maybe even more than once a week. And that is your involvement with the Louisville Sports Radio Network. Would this be the University of Louisville, the Louisville Cardinals? Is that who it is?
Yes, the mighty Louisville Cardinals.
Louisville Cardinals.
The mighty Louisville Cardinals. This job came about where I actually worked with the Louisville football team. I guess it was 4 or 5 years taking care of their headset system on the sideline. And it got to be where I had to step away from that. And the gentleman that was doing the engineering, his name is Gus Allen. He works for iHeartMedia in Louisville. A couple years after I had stepped away from the sideline, Gus had called me. He had taken on some additional responsibilities here and was just kind of needing to let this go. And he asked me if I would be interested. He said it would be great if you could do it because I know you know how to do it. And I figured, well, yeah, I could do that. I'll be up in the radio booth now, closer to the food and out of the weather. So yeah, this is something I could do for a while. And that's pretty much it. It's a remote for football, a weekly basis, for basketball, semi-weekly, for about 10 weeks out of the season. And it has its own challenges. Obviously, being at home is great because we're used to everything that's there. But then when you go on the road, and particularly places that I've never been before, you want to check with your stadium people, your frequency coordination people, because we do have sideline equipment that uses wireless mic and an IFB. So there's a lot of coordination going on before you go to a place that you've never been before. And some of the places that we have been, like Clemson, Syracuse, FSU, Notre Dame, these places that I know what to expect. But it's kind of, I told my wife, I said, this is kind of my fun job, because after I set everything up, and I'm hearing Paul and Craig in my headsets, I get to kind of sit back and watch the game. Unless, of course, I don't hear them in my headsets, and then it's on me. Uh, and after the game, you break it down. Road games, again, when you break their equipment down, we travel with the team. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like Flight of the Bumblebee in the booth when we get done with broadcast, because I'm throwing things in the case, and we're going to catch the bus with the team to catch the flight back home. At home, it's a little bit more relaxed, but it has some interesting challenges that I never knew existed. And even the sports broadcasting has changed so much over the past few years that it's kind of an eye-opening experience. It's just like, you don't just show up and you start calling the game. There's a lot involved before and after the game that we have to do.
I'm curious about a few of those things that maybe the uninitiated, like myself, would be surprised about. I got a few specific questions. What codec, what audio gear do you use to get back to the studio?
The codec we use, and we're actually Learfield has the broadcast rights to University of Louisville, so we're actually employed by Learfield, and we connect with their Jefferson City control room. We use just the Comrex. I've got a Comrex MX or NX, just a regular Comrex codec that we use. I've got a Behringer. It's a 16-channel mixer that they call it a stage mixer, but it fits in a rack, which makes it a lot easier for travel because you've got a huge 16-channel mixer. But with this thing fitting in a rack, I can fit the rack in the case that all the other equipment is, and I control it with a laptop, which I'm pretty much chained to a laptop anymore now anyway.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
it definitely makes it a lot smaller. And then the headsets are just run of the mill. I grabbed this one out of the case to do the live show with you today. It's just
I was going to ask where you got that if you five-fingered it off the Louisville Sports Network.
Well, actually, we got some new equipment in yesterday, and I think this is one out of the new equipment. And you had mentioned about how it sounds a lot better with the headset and microphone. I thought, well, I'll just grab this one out of the box and use it. So, but it's the headsets, the sideline stuff that Jody uses. It's nothing special, but it's just putting it all together and making it work. And then, like I said, we connect with Jefferson City, Missouri, and we have those guys are talking to us. When we go to a break, we're hearing the commercials, and those guys can us back in. I don't like doing television, and I guess to me it's not that difficult, but to people who've never been around it, it's just like kind of like gee whiz type thing.
So the case, I guess, with on the Behringer mixer, you get a reverse feed, a mix minus or a back feed from Jefferson City, from Learfield, and you have a producer back there who's actually counting down the spot break so the announcers know when to start talking again, right?
Right. That's what he's doing. He's just like a regular board op. I won't say regular board op because those guys are great, but he's just like a board op back in the studio. But he's also having an account instead of board op and get just a game somewhere. He's board op in our game, and he's telling us that he'll count us back in. We have to do legal IDs, and he'll count us back in for that. That kind of stuff I have to keep up with. And the neat way I keep up with the legal ID is that I've got an Apple Watch on, and it vibrates at the top of the hour. So then I try to let Paul know it's time for a legal ID. Now, of course, if we're in the middle of the action, we kind of have to wait. We can't just stop while they're running into the end zone to do a legal ID.
Sure.
And sometimes we get kind of excited, and we might, I don't know, forget a legal ID every once in a while. But it's for someone who's been around it, it's just ho hum. But then you've got people who, and the one thing that really surprised me is when I went to work with the team, is how much it takes to move a football team. They don't just show up on Saturday at Sanford Stadium and start playing football. So that was the one surprising thing for me, is moving a football team. And then for bowl games, the Music City Bowl was the last bowl that I went to down there in Nashville. And we're bringing, we've got our normal semi-truck that brings all the equipment. And I think those guys in the equipment had like 2 or 3 box trucks because they're down there for a week. And not only do they have to train, they have to practice, but they also have to keep up with their studies. So yeah, it takes a lot to move a football team.
I got more questions, but we're going to take a quick break. I got more questions about this. So, because I haven't done it, and I'm several technical issues I'm curious to know about. We're talking to Scott Cason. He's a contract engineer for the Louisville Sports Radio Network, and the ABIP inspector for Kentucky and for parts of Indiana too. Hey, at the controls at on our show is Suncast, and Suncast is ready to let us see one of our advertisers, and that is one of our sponsors, and that's Angry Audio. And I'm going to tell you about the headphone disconnector right now. As broadcast engineers, we spend a lot of our time connecting things together, but sometimes it's just as important to be able to disconnect something. What am I talking about? This is the Angry Audio Disconnector. The disconnector. So here you have something that you just put in series with your headphones, with your Talents headphones. Now, this is available in the 1/4-inch tip ring sleeve size, as you see here. Also available in the 3.5 millimeter size. And you can even mix and match inputs and outputs. The point is, this is what's in the middle. This is the disconnector. So you have a talent that forgets to take their headphones off. They get up, they start to walk away, and boop, look at that. No more damage to the connectors that you normally use. No more damage to the headphone jack on the audio console or under the furniture. Oh, look, it just went back together, and I wasn't even trying. It's magnetic. It's the disconnector, or the headphone disconnector from Angry Audio. Disconnector. No more broken connectors. Check it out on the web at angryaudio.com. Thanks a lot to Angry Audio for sponsoring our show. So many cool things at Angry Audio that will help you build your studio and make it reliable and convenient too. Our show is also brought to you by Max Connect. And, you know, they do a lot of things like Max Connect Wireless. They offer engineering services over a good part of the USA. They'll build you beautiful studios. But something else they have at Max Connect, a new product that was brought out, I think, around NAB time. It's the RMT16. Now, what is it? Well, it's a one-rack unit, multi-tuner chassis built for monitoring your stations or your competitor stations or the weather station or whatever, with up to 4 tuner cards. And you choose how many tuner cards you want in there. Up to 4 tuner cards will fit in there, each delivering 4 tuners. The RMT16 supports a total of 16 individual tuners in one rack space. And you can choose AM, FM, weather, HD support, and separate antenna inputs, you know, as appropriate for those. Configuration and monitoring run through a built-in web interface. So you can change frequency, change band, change HD subchannels. You can lock the tuners so that they won't be moved. Of course, they suffer through a power outage just fine. They come right back up to what you had them set to. That's their design. You can stream any of the tuners' audio privately via the web GUI, or you can push the tuners to your own IceCast server for logging or for offsite monitoring. You can you can check for silent audio, for carrier loss. The RMT16 supports silence detection, carrier loss alerts, and it integrates with SNMP for centralized monitoring. Each tuner also offers a balanced analog audio output, and that's in the Studio Hub format. Of course, you can get those accessories from Angry Audio. In short, it's got a dense tuner count, browser control, alerting, streaming, and analog outputs all under one in one rack unit. Use it for signal performance assurance, compliance logging, or remote conference monitoring with minimal overhead. That's the RMT416. It's engineered to get the job done from Max Connect. Go to Max Connect, MAXXKONNECT, just like on your screen, to read all about it. Yeah, it is so cool. All right. Thanks a lot, Josh Bone, Max Connect, for making cool things for us broadcast engineers. It's Kirk Harnack. I'm with Scott Cason for today's show. Scott is an engineer in the Louisville area. I've known Scott for a long time and just haven't ever had a chance to sit down and talk to him. So this is my opportunity. Scott, back on the sports broadcasting front, I'm curious, your Comrex units, do they operate with wired internet or wireless or either one? Do you have a choice there?
They can operate with either one. Usually when a stadium starts getting full, Wi-Fi goes to crap. So I have them all plugged into the hard connected to the jack in the wall. I don't want to depend on Wi-Fi. I think Wi-Fi is probably more for like if you're a radio station out on remote somewhere at Toys R Us, that would be useful. But for something like this, I kind of like to be plugged into it. And it's an interesting segue with the Max Connect. I've been meaning to ask Josh how that would work for something like a football game, because there have been
Yeah.
times where there may have been a hiccup in the internet that took us off the air, or if there was something at the stadium that damaged the internet connection. If the Max Connect would be suitable to use as kind of like a backup for us to stay on the air. One of these days, it's like I'm passing him like me and you're passing,
Yeah. Well, of course they advertise, and my experience has been exactly what they advertise, that Josh has made agreements with the carriers to give you prioritized data and a static IP address. And that means you can have a stadium full of 60,000 people or more, all doing their Facebook or Instagram updates or whatever. You're not on those channels. You're on channels that are mostly clear. The only people with more priority would be first responders. And hopefully there's not too much of that going on at wherever you're at. Otherwise, you may want to skedaddle out of there or cover it for news. But yeah, go ahead.
I actually say if first responders are coming to the stadium, I'm getting out of the booth.
Oh. Yeah, so I've had great luck with it in busy places and places just with poor coverage. I have a couple of Max Connect modems right here. We haven't needed to use them lately to do our show, but they're a backup for doing our show. I do think they're awesome. So
that's
and a lot of people do too.
That's something I'm always thinking of is a backup. If this fails, where do you go? If that fails, where do you go? And I've wondered before that, it does, a power bump might take a switch that I'm connected to in a stadium down. And like I said, I just hope one day I can grab him when Josh and I are not running hither and yon, and just kind of ask him more about his Max Connect.
10 or 15 or even 20 years ago, when you could get wired internet in a stadium, in a sports booth, it was pretty iffy. It was, is it going to work well? Does it go through the university switch? What's blocked? Can I even get out in any way? A lot of questions would come up. And I take it nowadays, because internet is so vital for everything that we do, especially broadcasting, I take it that there's probably somebody at the university that checks it out and makes sure it's going to work for you. So when you show up, you plug in, it's going to work for you.
They do. And I was asking the guys at the Yum Center, because I also engineer our men's basketball home games. And I asked the guys, I said, so what kind of internet have you guys got coming in here? And they said, we have two 10 gig fiber circuits coming in, as a failover. And he said, there's some events that we're using all of that 10 gigs. So then I asked him, I said, okay, so are we kind of prioritized down here? And he's like, oh yeah. He said the wired internet gets priority over the Wi-Fi in the building. But he said, again, there's maybe one or two events in the 15 years that the Yum Center has been open that they've ever approached maxing out that pipe.
Now, do you carry a backup codec of any kind? If for some reason the Comrex didn't work, what do you do?
I use my primary as a Bricklink 2 that we acquired last season. And the NX is actually what I use as a backup now. But I've got them both set up, and I've got them both plugged into the internet. Only one of them is connected to Jefferson City at a time. And if the Bricklink ever goes down, all I got to do is hit that connect button on the NX, and it'll connect to Jefferson City, and hopefully we won't miss a beat.
And I take it Learfield and Jefferson City, they have some kind of N+1. They have some backup codecs there.
They've got the racks. They've got the Comrex, the rack units, and they've got a main and a backup. So I mean, if I wanted to, I could connect the NX to the backup, but we'll kind of keep it simple for now. But again, it's just the way I think is like, okay, where do I go to if this fails? What happens if this starts smoking? So, but I have two of everything.
Go ahead. Question about the talent. What is critical for the talent in terms of the ease of them hearing each other, hearing the reporter from the field or the locker room, and hearing cues from Learfield? How do you make sure that that's going to be to their liking?
Well, after working with Paul and Craig for the last 3 years, I've got an idea of what they want to hear and how they want to hear it. But yeah, they need to hear, and we also have a third guy up in the our broadcast booth with us, who is a stats guy. And what he'll do is he'll keep an eye on if there's a punt return, the yardage of the punt return, and then if it's either a fair catch, obviously it's the kick, how far the kick went, and then he keeps up with how far the return was, and he's telling that in Paul's ear all the time. The stats. How many yards was that gain? How many yards did we lose? That kind of stuff. So there's usually somebody in Paul's ear the entire game, but listening to the broadcast, you can't tell it because Paul has been doing this for so many years. He's used to that. But I still don't like telling him stuff when he's talking because it's kind of discerning to me. I try to catch when he's in a breath or if Craig's taking over. Craig is our color guy, analysis, and Paul is the play-by-play guy. So I'll usually try to wait until he passes off to Craig to tell Paul something because I still don't like interrupting.
I know what you mean, and there are some people who are so good at that. I do TV weather from time to time, and I when I'm doing the weather on TV live, trying to look at the camera, look at the green screen, talk somewhat intelligently about what's going on,
Right.
and the director says something just as simple as 1 minute in my ear. I swear my brain goes, fourth gear, third gear, let's go to second gear. Okay, we got to consider that. Okay, that's done. Let's go back to third gear, speed back up in fourth gear. And then, of course, there's 10 seconds, and then there's wrap. And I realize those cues are different, but man, my brain just can't handle it. So I'm in awe of people who can talk while somebody's talking to them.
Right. Well, Paul Rogers, the play-by-play guy that I work with, I think he told me that he's been doing this for 50 years. I hope that was right. I hope I'm not aging him too much. But he's been doing it for so long that he's used to people talking into his ear. To me, it's still something where I don't want to catch him in a bad moment and tell him, station ID and have him lose his train of thought. But it's, and I've worked in television as well. I've worked for network affiliates in Albany, Georgia, and worked for the Nashville network there in Nashville. So I understand what you're talking about when you mention, giving the cues to the talent. And then, of course, I don't know if you still have floor directors or not, but you got the floor director doing the lasso trying to wrap you up. So it can be kind of discerning if you're not used to it.
All right. We're talking to Scott Cason. He's an engineer in Louisville, Kentucky. That's right, Scott. You were here in Nashville, weren't you, at the Nashville network?
I was. It was a very interesting experience. Unfortunately, I kind of got into the tail end of things when Gaylord was in the process. Well, Group W, who they had partnered with, had made Gaylord an offer for TNN. And I guess it was an offer that they couldn't refuse because TNN, I guess I'd been there maybe 2 or 3 years when they announced the sale. Well, naturally, first hired, first fired. And they eventually laid me off. But Ed had a great time. I worked with a lot of brilliant people there. Some of the guys that I enjoyed talking to had been around since the WSM TV days, and they were full of stories. I'm not sure how many of them I can relate to you here, but working with those guys was great. They were a bunch of professionals. Learned a lot from them. It was it broke my heart the first time we came back to the Music City Bowl. We stayed in the Opryland Hotel. And by this time, of course, everything had been pulled out. And they had pushed all of our studios over. The buildings that we were in, they had pushed that over. The administrative building was gone. There was nothing between the Opryland Hotel and the Opry House when I came back to Nashville. And it was sad to see.
Yeah. Okay. I guess we could do a whole show on that, but it'd be kind of TV related. Were you more into audio at that time with the TV with the Nashville network, or what'd you do?
I know I was video maintenance. They had us split up into two separate shops. Actually, three. We had the audio maintenance guys, and obviously they took care of all the audio, the soundboards, microphones, and I think they did some work on instruments. They would work on the instruments for the performance for the Opry. And then they had the video guys. Obviously, we took care of the videotape machines, cameras, switchers, and that kind of stuff. And we had a third smaller shop. Those guys took care of what we called EL, which was the headsets, and they took care of RF coordination around the Opryland complex. So they had, and we did a lot of production that weren't related to TNN. We did production for CBS. We did production for the networks, HGTV. I think Gaylord made a good chunk of money off of the production we did for other networks that wasn't that wasn't going to air on TNN.
Gotcha. Well, I would have loved to. I watched TNN, when I was younger, as you probably did. But I sure missed that. I wish we still produced that, that huge variety of shows, a lot of quantity of shows here in Nashville. Hey, we're going to take our last break, and then right after that, we're going to have. We need you to pick a topic here, Scott. If you want to talk about cleaning up messes, how you prioritize that, we won't have much time. And you mentioned some station owners don't know what they don't know, and you have to, diplomatically help them along, hold them by the hand, and show them what they don't know and what they need to know, or maybe a concern about lack of RF expertise. That's coming up in our very last quick segment after this word. Our show is brought to you in part by Broadcasters General Store, BGS. Love those folks, and just saw some of them a couple weeks ago at the Georgia Broadcasters, and they're here to promote Vox Pro, which is something that you probably need at your station if you're taking phone calls and you want to have a great sounding phone call. Let's hear about that.
Hey, what's happening? St. John here, coming to you from Command Central, and wanted to tell you about the absolute best partner you can have in radio. I'm talking about, boom, Wheatstone's Vox Pro. Now, a lot of folks have used previous versions of Vox Pro, all awesome, but I want to tell you about some of my favorite new features in 7. And for folks who've never used Vox Pro before, I'm about to tell you why it's an absolute game changer and essential for really fast-paced multi-element radio. Lots of different audio software out there. Why Vox Pro? Because it was designed for radio. It's the only software designed to do what we needed to do, which is record, edit, playback in real time. When I say lightning fast, I'm going to show you how fast you can edit stuff up in Vox Pro right now. So literally 3 clicks on the controller, mark left, mark right, everything that gets marked, you hit delete, it goes away. It's literally that fast. So we're going to take this part right here. Boom. From caller 9 to him saying, I'm ready.
5, ready for that secret sound.
Boom. All of that stuff, hit delete, it goes away. Here's your edit.
You are tackling secret sound, caller 9.
I'm ready, St. John.
So one of the best features of version 7, this is awesome. It's effects macros, and you can literally put a chain of effects together so that instead of having to normalize a phone bit and then use noise reduction on it and EQ it and all that, you can literally build a chain. One button, this one's called call right here. I just click that. All of those processes happen instantaneously. Literally saves 80% of your editing and cleanup time. Final thing that I love about Vox Pro, and there's so much more to get into, but one of my favorite things, you can load it on a laptop. I've literally done my show from a hotel room in Armenia to the conference room at, this was fun, jury duty. Great thing, no one could tell the difference. Vox Pro makes it totally easy. Telling you, if you're looking for the best on-air partner, call my friends at Wheatstone, ask them about Vox Pro, and you will be glad you did.
And of course, if you want to get Vox Pro, get it from a dealer like Broadcasters General Store. They've got sharp pencils, and they can tell you exactly when it will arrive. I'll tell you, BGS has got a fantastic back-end infrastructure system that helps them run their business, which makes you happy because you get the lowest prices and you know when things are going to arrive. They really work with you. I work with BGS both as a consumer, both as a radio station owner myself and customer, and also on the manufacturer side, since I work with Telos Alliance, that they are a great partner with us. Check them out. BGS.cc is the website. All right, Scott Cason's our guest. We got a few minutes left here before the show is over. Scott, cleaning up messes, station owners don't know what they know, or a lack of RF expertise. You want to choose a topic to spend 3 or 4 minutes on?
I think probably the lack of RF expertise is the biggest issue that's facing us now. 20 years ago, it was kind of off in the distance, and here we are now. We've got people coming up that don't know RF, that haven't worked with RF, that are afraid of RF, and RF is kind of important to our business, but they don't know how to work on transmitters. Even setting aside tubes, they don't know how to work on even the solid-state transmitters now. and they
Yeah.
don't have the intuitive ability to understand when something is going wrong or about to go wrong. And I think that's a big issue that we're going to be facing probably in the next 5 years, if not sooner.
So on the one hand, that could mean continued consulting, employment opportunities, even later in life for engineers like you and like me and like many others who are kind of in our general age range. But what does that mean when we time out or aren't interested anymore in going to a tower site on a mountain or in a sloggy bottom somewhere? Where are these people going to come from? What's a station owner to do?
That's the $50,000 question. I know that Larry down in Alabama is doing a really good job with his engineering academies. We're looking at starting something in Kentucky, and I think a lot of our broadcast associations are going to have to take the lead on this to get these guys out here, to get them trained, just a basic understanding of RF, so they can work on these transmitters and keep these radio stations on the air. I don't see, unfortunately, our tech schools have kind of abandoned this. They're not teaching that anymore. They're wanting to teach more computers and ones and zeros. And while, that's important, if you don't have anything that'll put in the air what's coming out of your desktop computer, then it's kind of a moot point then.
The SBE has this program, the Technical Professional Training Program. You pay a little extra and you get a lot of training and a lot of guides, and then some certification testing is available. So I think that's a helpful thing. Your state level efforts are certainly well appreciated. And you're right. What Larry Wilkins has been doing in Alabama for years is extremely helpful. And I've seen some younger than me people in the Alabama program. So
I forgot to mention the SBE. Gary Moore's probably going to give me crap about that later, but I would kind of like to see the SBE maybe partner with some of these state associations and kind of create a partnership that way. I've attended a couple of Larry's engineering academies down in Alabama, and they're great, and it's great to see some younger people attending them. The question is, are there enough younger people attending them? When I got into this business, many years ago, I was the youngest engineer in the room, and I was kind of funny. And the joke I like to tell is that a lot of the older engineers that I worked with were either alcoholics or former alcoholics. And now that I'm an older engineer, I totally understand that. But now it's like I'm the only engineer in the room. And it's a problem that we're going to have to get together with our broadcasters and get these guys to understand that this isn't going to go away. And we really need to address this, the sooner the better.
Your observation, I'm kind of reminiscing myself. For some years, I was the youngest guy in there. I was the youngest engineer in the room. And then I kind of lost track of the middle. And now I'm often, one of the older engineers in the room. And that's a bit of an odd feeling to be the old guy in the room, but not much older than the other guys.
Yeah, and people are asking you for advice. I'm like, what are you asking me for advice for? Ask one of these older guys. And it's like, well, you are the older guy. I'm like, oh, okay.
So I am. You're right.
I've been doing this since I was 13 years old, so I guess, I am the older guy now.
Of course, Scott, I've got to apologize again. I have forgotten to warn you that we're looking to you right now for a tip of the week. Maybe a tool, a website, a piece of sage advice that you would like to leave our viewers and listeners with, that they can take home, maybe make some action of it, maybe just put it in their back pocket, have it available. What if I said, man, I need a piece of advice to carry with me for the rest of the week at least? What would you say, Scott?
Check your tower lights more than once a week.
Okay, we know why. Hey, there are, and I don't know what compels a station. If it's a group-owned tower, maybe somebody else is responsible. But there are services out there that will, monitoring as a service that will monitor your tower lights, under a contract for you. They'll also, they'll take the responsibility for contacting the FAA, right?
I think LumenServe is one of those that does it. And that's a great service, especially for if you talk about a company, say like LaGrange Communications, that has how many hundreds of TV stations and towers they have
Right.
now. That's a great service for those guys because it takes one less thing for their local engineers to worry about. But if you're talking about a little standalone Class A FM in the middle of nowhere, they're going to have to take responsibility for stuff like that. And it's like you touched on before. Sometimes people don't know what they don't know, and it can be some mistakes are forgiving than others, and a mistake like that is not very forgiving. And it's just us trying to get the word out. It's like you've got to do these things. I understand it costs you a little bit of money, but in the long run, it'll save you money for liability purposes. And as far as like the EAS system, I've had a little bit of pushback on monitoring KET because of the little set-top boxes that we need, and you get them off of Amazon for maybe $20 or $30. And
Oh, wow.
I try to frame it to them, and of course use a small UPS because they don't like power bumps. But I try to frame it to them as this, like, you have to think of this as a service to your listeners. If something happens, you want to be the station that they turn to. This is part of that.
Sure. And that's, I know none of us like unfunded mandates, like having to buy a new EAS box, like a lot of us had to do in the past 10, 12 years or so. But adding another source that is reliable to your EAS inputs, that doesn't seem like a very big lift. So, Scott, we're going to let you go, and thank you so much for joining us. If people want to, I don't know, you're probably as busy as you want to be, so I don't know if you want to give us any contact information or not. Can we find you at least on Facebook?
Facebook are probably the best way to get in touch with me is just shoot me an email, Scott at scottcason with an n.com. I'm busy, but I'm never too busy for somebody who really needs help. A station out there who needs help. I'm never too busy for that. I'm never too busy for any barbecue. Just go ask Jeff Welton. Yeah, it's Scott at scottcason.com is probably the quickest and easiest way to get in touch with me.
All right. Well, we'll put that in the show notes. Scott Cason, thank you so much for joining us for This Week in Radio Tech. It's been fabulous, interesting, good to reconnect with you after ships passing in the night so many times at different state conventions. And big thanks to Suncast, our producer. Another fabulous job, sir. You ought to consider a job in TV production because you're just doing great. I really appreciate you, Suncast. And we got to go. I wish Chris Tarr well with his dilated eyes. Hopefully he'll be back to full vision again pretty soon. We got to go. We're gonna hey, next week I think we've got Jordan Tuck on the show. He's been on before, and he's going to talk about resurrecting some beautiful old broadcast gear. Always love talking to Jordan. It's a pleasure. We got to go. We'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech.